to see so many of you here this evening for this Museum Conversations seminar. My name's Ivan Gaskell. I'm Professor of Cultural History and Museum Studies here at our Graduate Centre. And I'd like to welcome you to this seminar in the Museum Conversations series on behalf of our Director Susan Weber and our Dean Peter Miller. Our Museum Conversations brings to our Graduate Centre leading museum scholars from beyond the New York area to talk about challenges that such institutions face, and in particular those that would benefit from a careful SWOT analysis. Now, it's no coincidence that the majority of our guests have been museum directors, and tonight is no exception. Museum directors face sometimes scarcely surmountable challenges that those of us in academic institutions can only be thankful that we avoid. You may not be familiar with this useful term, SWOT analysis. That's S-W-O-T. I've not had to appeal to it much since I abandoned the museum world, but when I was flailing within it, I found SWOT analysis invaluable. A SWOT analysis is nothing to do with militarized police teams storming buildings, nor with brainy nerds desperately studying for an examination. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And all our institutions and those individuals who comprise them have strengths and weaknesses and can spin threats into opportunities and opportunities into threats. The Humboldt Forum in Berlin, about which this evening's speaker will be informing us, is a prime case ripe for SWOT analysis. I'm absolutely delighted that Viola König was able to get away from Germany for a short time to address us. She's the director of the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, one of the great ethnological museums of the world. Before taking up this position, she was director of the scarcely less important Überseemuseum in Bremen. Viola is truly a curatorial director. She's curated and co-curated numerous exhibitions, and I'll just mention a few: Aztecs in Berlin in 2003, the Tropics, Views from the Middle of the Globe, which was not only in Berlin, but in Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia, Cape Town, and Bangkok, and then Native American modernism in Berlin in 2012. She's a specialist in the ancient Americas, and her scholarship extends into the academic world. She holds honorary professorial appointments at the University of Bremen and at the Freie Universität in Berlin. She's a member of the prestigious Berlin Interinstitutional Research Group, TOPOI, the formation and transformation of space and knowledge in ancient civilizations. But most of all, for me, it's a personal pleasure that Viola is here with us this evening. She and I have seen one another at a bunch of workshops and symposia in various countries, but wherever we meet, I feel that I'm in the warm presence of Berlin vitality. So this evening she brings with her that Berlin vitality to New York City to speak to us about one of the most SWOT analysis amenable museum projects in the contemporary world. And her title is Real and Metaphoric Spaces, Perspectives and Positions in the Making of the Future Humboldt Forum at Berlin. Please welcome me, don't welcome me, I've been welcomed many times here already. Please join me in welcoming Viola König.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I really need to thank you, Ivan, for this invitation. I really look forward to it since April, when we first talked about it. And then I learned Laura Minsky, who is here. I have a feeling a sort of a soul. Is that okay? She really pampered me. and so I was able to make a nice walk here. And I've heard a lot about institution before, Graduate Center, but I had somehow some wrong ideas, and I'm glad I learned now it's a really overall welcoming institution, and especially, of course, that you do these special conversations on museums. I don't know if we should add a P to the SWOT thing, because it's a lot about politics, And I'm not a learned politician. I never planned to be one. And sometimes I found myself, lost and also not really willing to be there. But when you're a museum's director, don't believe you can keep your innocence. At one point, it's just politics. Well, and I want to start first of all with the story of Humboldt Forum. You have to learn about it in order to understand the rest of it. For the last 5 years, the project has been determined by, let's say, 2 main issues. One is those who go to Berlin still have to use the tiny, nice little airport called Tegel, even though a large airport was supposed to be open in 2011, which never happened. Nobody knows when this airport is actually going to be opened. In between, an airline already almost got bankrupt, Air Berlin. So this project is not supposed to be a second airport, and everybody's looking at that. And the second thing is that the pretended non-existing concept of Humboldt Forum. I hope when I finish this lecture, at least you are convinced that this is not the whole truth about it. So, I'm long, I have to do it here. I'm trying to divide my speaking time into these 4 topics. I will start with real space, history and connotations of the Prussian city palace. Then I go on and I go over in the debates, expectations and conflicts and the controversies. Humboldt Forum is supposed to be the largest cultural project of Germany. Then I come concretely to the basic structure and the elements of what up to date is still my exhibition concept, but I will explain that this will not be the case forever. And then, because Ivan also asked me to talk about this, and now I have made experience what it means, the practical challenge of moving 12,000 objects to the center of Berlin. We are right in this now. Okay, so it all began in the late 17th century with the first Baroque palace that the Prussian king asked to build right in the center of the new city, the new Prussian metropole, if you wanted, and it looked more or less like this. From the very beginning, it had been a place for controversy, revolts, uprisings, rebellions, but also by royal proclamations. And all these activities are united by the fact that they all failed. So here, this is a photo from of the Prussian King William II, when he mobilized for World War I in August 14. As you know, Germany lost that war, like the next war to follow. Then here, Karl Liebknecht, the communist leader, was announcing a republic in 1919. That also failed. Then the palace got severely damaged in World War II. And then with the East German government, it was used for deployments of any kinds of communist and socialist political goals. But still there were the ruins of the Prussian palace, which of course were not really a memory of what the communists and the East Germans wanted to have near to their deployment. So it thought it could have been reconstructed. It was not as destroyed as other buildings that got reconstructed, but the communists saw it as a symbol of the royal kingdom of Prussia. So they destroyed it. Sorry, here. But before we move on to what happened afterwards, you have to see this bird's eye view in order to understand that the center of Berlin was really arranged in a special overall structure that made sense. On the left-hand side, what you cannot see here is a museum's island. And if you follow the avenue passing the palace, you are unter den Linden, passing the Humboldt University, the opera, and that ends at the Brandenburg Gate. So this all was an overall structure by Schlüter, Stüler, Sonderschinkel, all the big architects somehow had their hands in that. But the East Germans, as I said, did not want any remembrance of the old royal Prussian kingdom of Berlin. So as late as 1976, or almost 13 years after the palace was demolished, they decided to build the Palace of the Republic against opposite of the original structure. So it was really cutting into the empty place of the ex-Prussian palace, and it was a very famous and accepted center by the East Germans, by everybody. They could go there for dance, to bars, to conventions, to any kind of activities. So the East Germans really liked it. By the program, even though the building itself never was liked as much. So when the wall came down after unification with the Chancellor Helmut Kohl, he more or less pretended that the building was full of asbestos, and so there was another reason to destroy this building as well. So you have to keep in mind what was going on that place. You have all the time left, right, left, kingdom, communist kingdom, East German Republic, and it all ends with some. So this space is really loaded of German history and German memories, and even a lot of people living today still remember that they passed their youth, that they found their boyfriends, their husbands in the came, that this building had to be demolished. It was not said so clear in the beginning, but what they did, and this is an old recipe when you want to get rid of something, you're allowed to fall apart. It fall down, nobody put any restorations anymore, so at the end it was demolished. It would look like that. But one has to remember that already 9 years earlier, the former president of the Prussian Heritage Foundation, Klaus-Dieter Lehmann, who today is the president of the Goethe Institution, he had proposed to move the non-European collections from Dahlem back to the center of Berlin. Because what had happened is that after unification, the museums that were housed after World War II in Dahlem could move back into their original buildings that were on the eastern side of the city, or in the buildings of the museum's islands. So these buildings got restored one after the other, and the collections could move back from Dahlem right to the center. And the only that were left in Dahlem were the non-European collections. And what happened, all the visitors, all the many tourists, all these international visitors that used to come before 1989 and after the 1950s to Dahlem, they now changed and went to the center. And we really declined. We really had a hard loss of visitors. And I made the experiments. Whenever I made an exhibition in the Martin-Gropiusbau in the center, I had a lot of visitors, like the Aztecs and the tropics. When we did things like Benin, Arts from the Island, Voodoo, it would be less than half, a quarter of the visitors we had in the center. So there was no way to stay in Dahlem. But when Lehmann decided in 1999 that the collection should move to the center of the city, nobody thought about a Prussian palace. That came later. But when you read the newspapers today, it's described the other way around, as if there was first the plan of the palace and then the decision of moving the non-European collections in that. And in all the controversies, that makes a lot of change of meaning when you believe that the non-European collections, what are they supposed to do in a reconstructed parliament? It was German parliament in 2002 that decided for the reconstruction of the Prussian palace. But now we are in 2016. We had 4 moratoriums. And from the moratoriums you can see that the government never was so sure about this decision. They stopped it again and again and again. At the end, in 2008, Franco Stella, an Italian architect whom before nobody ever had known, won the architectural competition for the design of the reconstruction of the Berlin City Palace. And this was a sort of a compromise. There was not a second prize in the competition, but a special prize. The best prize for us as museums people with galleries that you really want to have in a museum was invented by the second prize. But they missed to plan a cupola, and they were supposed to do it, but they didn't want it. So even though their design was perfect for us, they could not win the competition because they missed to do the cupola. So we have now Franco Stella's building, and it's really hard for us because as you can see, these are galleries in a palace. These are no exhibition galleries. And then for another really accidental thing, the ex-director general of the Prussian Heritage Foundation, he put us into the upper floors, not in the lower floors, because he had the idea that downstairs there should be the shops, the restaurant, everything, convention center, special exhibition galleries. And then on the first floor, as was a plan by Parliament in 2002, the libraries and the science, like the Humboldt University place. I have to say place because we still don't know their concept. It's one of the reasons why it's true there is no concept for the whole thing existing. And then he decided that in the next floor there should be the ethnographic collections that are sort of primitive, and then have the exhibitions of the so-called Museum of Asiatic Art up near to heaven. So what we say, a Jacob's ladder. And I was complaining from the first minute, but Lehmann was so busy in convincing the politicians that the non-European collection should move to the center, so he said he cannot kill this. So we still live with this division of the floors. So, but here you can see quite nicely the overall concept by Parliament decided, yes, we will have in the couverture, the ancient couverture of the palace, this building, that it restores the destroyed overall composition of the museum's island. I think everybody who is in this discussion does agree that to maintain the old couverture was a good decision. You can really see it here. The Palace of the Republic was the other way round. It followed the river Spree. And to have it this way is perfect. Now, here you see Franco Stella's palace in the inside. He was allowed to do his own facade on the right-hand side at the river Spree, but he was supposed to reconstruct 3 sides of facade in the original way. He was free to design the first part of the patio with a roof over it, but he had to maintain the old patio at the right-hand side. So you have his modern facade with the old patio and the modern patio with the old facade. So it's tricky. So it's sort of a guarantee that you maintain the old palace. Here are some numbers. I hope at the end, please do not ask questions on that. I took it, I think, from a Lufthansa commercial thing, and this is not my world. It's several numbers too big for me, but just to give you an impression that we are talking about 615.5 million euro. Yeah, and here you have the entrance hall, and again in the ground floor you have special exhibitions, galleries, and the museum of the site. In the second floor you have Humboldt University with the City of Berlin exhibition that we only know since the summer of late fall of 2015. Before there was the city library planned, and then Berlin got a new mayor, and the new mayor decided to change the concept. And on the third and fourth floor you have the Ethnological Museum and Museum for Asiatische Kunst. So why are there green squares? They are green because we are ready to go. We are really ready. The museum of the site is ready, and the two museums are ready. The rest is really under construction. So here you have some impressions of the history of the site. It's a small museum, very small museum. And now we go to Bad Dahlem. I mentioned Dahlem several times before. It's in the southwest corner of Berlin. Maybe some people who are here know it and like it. It's made in a fantastic way, but the architect Fritz Bornemann was tricky as well. He not only designed the building, but also the exhibitions. And he designed the exhibition in a way that as a curator, you have a hard time to change anything. If you want to change, you need a lot of money because you have to put down everything. But important are the numbers. We have 500,000 of objects there, not counting the audio, not counting the historic photographs, not inside all the film material we have. That comes on top. From Africa, 75,000 objects, almost 190,000 objects from the Americas, including large collections that are pure archaeological collections. From Asia, we have 135,000, and the Museum of Asiatic Art, that is quite important in Berlin, has less than 10,000, so it's a very small collection. I think they have like 35,000 or so. Oceania, Australia, 65,000, and around 11,000 objects are going to move into Humboldt form, just of the Ethnological Museum, Ethnologisches Museum. It is important to see, in order to understand the controversies and the debates that are going on now in Germany, trying to follow, to understand German colonialism and German colonies in East and South Africa and in the South Pacific. That was for a very short time, not so dramatically like the British, the French, the Belgian, the the Dutch and the Portuguese colonies, but you know, Germans have this trauma of how to deal with the Nazi time, so they see this was injustice here, and now they have the feeling they have to work that very thoroughly through. Right now, last week, the German Historical Museum opened a big exhibition on German colonialism. However, if you look to the collections in the Ethnologisches Museum, you see they are not the most important parts. But the press is always telling we have large collections coming out of colonial context. Even the African and Pacific collections are not all coming out of colonial context. So you really need a careful study in order to talk about these collections. Now, I told you we had 4 moratoriums between 2001 and 2010. And that was a time that everything was so unsecure that no publications came out, even though concepts existed, at least with the museums. but only after the first concept was made in 2008, some publications came out. So when my hard drive was almost exploding at my museum's computer, I decided to do everything on a publication that I found to be important. So we did that the long way, 1999 to 2012, where you find all the speeches, all the decisions, all the concepts, and so on. And it was also an opportunity for me to publish the first concept of 2008. The overall structure has not changed since then, because what we really had to find out with all the experiences of moratoriums, to find an overall structure that would hold for a long time and not get out of fashion, out of time. So then for the groundstone ceremony came the 2013 publication. Then we got money for 0.5 million euros to do a laboratory experimental phase for 3.5 years. That was summarized in the 2015 publication, and only 2 or 3 weeks ago came out another sort of summary, very similar to what we did in 2012, but edited by the former general director and Haus Bredekamp of Humboldt University, an art historian who is still in the play. I will explain that later. But in order to understand, SWOT you said.
SWOT.
Yeah. Above all, there is a Minister of State in the Federal Chancellery and Federal Government, the Commissioner for Culture and Media, that right now is Monika Grütters. Her first office is in the same building like Angela Merkel's, and so they can have coffee together and speak whenever they want to, so they are very close. The Prussian Heritage Foundation, Lehmann was the president when I started, now it's Hermann Patzinger, and all the States Museum of Berlin are in the hierarchy under the president of the Prussian Heritage Foundation, and the general director of the States Museums of Berlin are 17 museums. When you work in a museum, you say museum's director. When you work with the director general, you say the collections. So you can see there is different perspectives. The governing major of Berlin has 7,000 square meters out of the whole thing, which is quite a lot of square meters, on the first floor. Only 1,000 square meters were left over for Humboldt University, and for a long time the Berlin part, as we say, had the Central and Regional Library, ZLB, until 2015. There existed 2 different concepts. First, more a general concept that I personally liked very much, because it was made, there was a reason why they put it into it, a 12 hours open library for media, for young people to meet. Like for example, in Denmark today you have this kind of libraries that are really open spaces. And I personally liked it very much, but after a couple of years, when the president went to Arabia, they changed the concept and made a language center, which for me is a nice thing, but not for the public right in the center of Berlin. And as I said, last year, the concept was changed again, and now they want a Berlin City Museum. So it's not France, it's not the French president, and then a clear structure. This is Germany, you know, this is Germany. And the ex-Minister of State in the Federal Chancellery, Bernd Neumann, he asked the first advisor, Martin Heller, who had the job between 2011 and 14, and he got us the money for the laboratory concept, which was a very hard time for us, but we learned a lot. We really learned a lot. And his contract was not prolongated because the minister changed, And now with Monica Grütters, we have Neil McGregor. He took over after he left the British Museum in 2015. And Monica Grütters founded a founding directorship, Gründungsintendanz, if anybody speaks German, Gründungsintendanz, in 2015. The head, the chair, and the one who has the real power is Neil McGregor. Horst Bredekamp from Humboldt University is still one of the honored first members of the whole idea. And Hermann Patzinger is the now president of the Prussian Heritage Foundation. He does not look so happy. And
He never does.
now, I come now to the third part. How much time do I have?
Oh, plenty. You've got 20 minutes.
I have 20 minutes?
If you like, if you want that.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm coming now to the third part of it. I think it was The Guardian or some British newspaper or the Deutsche Welle, whatever, wrote, in 2019, the Humboldt Forum is set to open in the center of Berlin. This major new museum will show artworks from all over the world on the 2 upper floors. The inaugural artistic director, Neil McGregor, is working on a general concept to be presented to the public at the beginning of November. What is wrong? This is not a museum. There are museums in it, but it's more than a museum. But because even Martin Heller did not manage to present an overall concept, it's still written in the newspapers, there is no concept. Now, I have to go back to Germany earlier than I thought, because on the 2nd of November, to read the newspapers, Neil McGregor or Monica Grütters will present the new concept. And up to this point, I have no idea what will happen to my concept. So let's celebrate it. It's the very last time that I can say this is my concept. There will be changes. But we are so advanced that the architects are really upset. They want no changes at all because they are so much advanced. And remember the airport. Okay. Neil McGregor knows the concept since 2011 because he was one of the members of the first advisory board to evaluate the exhibition concepts of the Ethnological Museum. We have traveled around the world. We have gone to South America, to South Pacific. In 2008, we were in Canada. So I think this is one of the most ever evaluated exhibition concepts that I know about. And now we are again at the point. And once again, we were upgrading our plans all the time. And I honestly must say, I think that I said that in Cambridge. I really was afraid that 2 years or 3 years before the opening to stop updating a concept is difficult. It's difficult because, and I will explain you now what were my ideas in order to be updated at any time, which is a challenging task. So we had 3 guidelines, and these had been there for the beginning, and I think they are still there. Who is speaking? So we give up our Deutungshoheit, the authority that only the creators of the museum are allowed to create the exhibitions. So we wanted to invite descendants of the groups where the collections come from, or art historians, or artists, or competitive scholars, colleagues. We wanted to show many perspectives that you can have on these collections. Then you always have to think about the visitors. Who is the audience? The audience will be different than the audience in Dahlem. We have to look at the museum's island. What kind of audience are we expecting to have? And then why should one go to see the exhibition in Humboldt Forum? Why not just cross the palace, just see how it is looking from the inside? Why go and see the exhibitions? What is the relevancy? Oh, I'm still Yeah, and here you see that we are quite advanced with our designers. Our designers are very well known in New York. It's Ralph Applebaum Associated. I don't have the time to tell you more about, which is another interesting chapter, about how we found designers for this huge space. It happened the night the exhibition, the competition text was published the morning or the night before Angela Merkel pronounced her very last moratorium in 2010. And as you can imagine, who would then deliver a costly proposal? But I don't have the time to talk about this longer, but you can see here everything is filled. This is just the third floor, and there's another fourth floor. Now the overall structure of the exhibition concept is flexible exhibition modules that for me should be changed, not at the same time, but here one, there one. Wherever a curator or an external curator has a great new idea, we should change the exhibition modules. Earliest 2 years after the opening, latest after 2 years. I think after 2 years everything should have been changed. Because usually you can only show 2% of your collections. We planned so-called visible storages. I have some experience with that from in Bremen. There is a visible storage. We adapted it from the MOA in Vancouver, where they started very early to have one, even though it's a different challenge when you have a visible storage and the people who made the objects are living around the museum. In Germany it's a bit different, but that way we also can show more objects, and we also want to change the visible storages. They're also made to change the objects even more often than the exhibition modules. Then because the space is so big, you have to work with the Museum of Asiatic Art 17,000 square meters, which is a lot of space. The rumors that we have less space than in Dahlem is just not true. The palace is not a beautiful place for exhibition, that's another thing, but by space, it's the same size. So we thought about meeting points. These are atmospheric spaces where you can sit down, where you can hear a lecture, a storyteller, a little music, musicians play, not the whole concert, but music and theater, or just use contemporary media in order to deepen what you have seen. Then the junior spaces, I will tell you more about it in a minute, and the special exhibition spaces, small spaces in between. There is a big exhibition, special exhibition gallery at the ground floor, and we plan minor little exhibitions, special exhibition spaces inside the exhibitions. So, we have 28 thematic flexible exhibition modules. Only the Ethnological Museum, the Museum of Asiatic Arts, is apart. And you don't need to read them all, which is almost impossible. But I heard a complaint, where is the uniform narrative? I know this complaint already from Bremen, and I'm a convinced director of saying, when you have such diverse collections like the ethnographic collections, covering so many disciplines like science of origin, music, film, cultural anthropology, social anthropology, archaeology. So why should we have a uniform narrative? Do we need one? Why should we need one? Humans do not follow uniform narratives, do they? Right? It's hard to fight for that. Somehow people always want a red ribbon to follow. Here you can see what we did in the 3 years of Humboldt Laboratory. Humboldt Laboratory was a challenge for the curators and the whole museum, because Martin Heller wanted young artists to come in. So the phrase that struck us more, that we were afraid mostly when Martin Heller said, a young artist is coming tomorrow having brand new ideas for Humboldt film. Okay. They were allowed to go get into the storages. They were allowed to do whatever they wanted with the objects. They brought in sometimes crazy ideas, sometimes aesthetically problematic ideas. But as the money was coming from the government, more or less, we had to open the doors. We had to learn that. And they did all kinds of things, not only exhibitions, not only installations, but we also could do conferences, special workshops, special formats, interventions, intersections, and at the end, my curators, or I can say over the 3 years, I saw my curators getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And we really ended the whole thing that the curators put the questions, that the curators decided, the other curators, that we had really top workshops like problems of climate change and how it is present in our collections, like how to do intersections that really make sense, how to mix media, film, music, exhibition, and how, I will show that in a minute, how really approach to complicate topics in an ethnographic museum. But I want first to come back to my junior spaces. I say my junior spaces because with the old guys of curators that fortunately retired a couple of years ago, it was such a hard fight to get the junior spaces. When I was not in the designers' offices, they immediately would steal my junior spaces, and the designers would follow me. Aaron, Peter Balls was one of them. Markus Schindelbeck was one of them, all these big names, but they hated the junior spaces. They said, this is stolen space. But Neil McGregor, I heard, is follow me in this. So the politicians always want in Humboldt Forum the answers of the big questions of the world. What are the big questions of the world? But what we did with the junior spaces, we started from kids' point of view. So 3 to year is like what you find in a dress store for young kids. So next, where we explain the Amazon world view, we will have how to comprehend the world. You get born, and how you comprehend the world. What is your world view? Scheffler yesterday, I heard, was talking a bit about my material understanding of objects. Then the 6 to 9 years, how do I navigate the world? Go to the South Pacific and navigate the Pacific Ocean. Then 9 to 12, where we explain Islam. And what do I believe? I get born, and usually I'm born in some religion, and even if it's no religion at all, I'm born into something. And then for the elder colonialism, what's that to me? Do I have to care for it? No, the example here with the Amazon, the worldview, perspectivism, it's called in cultural anthropology, and transformation in the Amazon. Here on the right-hand side, you see it's a circular exhibition concept. In the middle, you have the household, the central fire, where you get born in a safe world, attended by your mother, by your grandmother, by your aunties. And then when you get older, you go into the garden parts, hortens, the ground plants. And then the man's world is outside there in the jungle, in the forest, where men have to fight in competition with jaguars and other animals in order to hunt animals that can be hunted. And this worldview you find in basketry, you find the shaman tools and jaguar seats, and of course in the masks. This is the outer ring. I cannot show it here. Applebaum invented all the spears, building a sort of roof over the circular exhibition module. Yeah, here you can see it. Now, in Humboldt lab, one of the laboratory experiments was invited by a young curator that just started to enter into the museum's world, Andrea Scholz, and it was really a test. So when you came down the stairways into a little studio, you should somehow feel to be observed. And you were observed by the eyes of a jaguar. And you could be either the human or the pequari. And then this perspective changed. And as you can see here, you would see how the shaman, the moment he sits down on the chair in form of a jaguar, smoking something, really feels the transformation of being a human into a jaguar, to have the powers of the jaguar. So I heard rumors now that in the new concept we should work more together with natural sciences museums, which my ex-boss never would have allowed. Times have changed. I doubt that with stuffed animals in the collection of the natural science museums we can explain what we need to explain. We come from ethnographic objects, and it's so difficult to explain the tourist visitors, or the young pupils coming from East Berlin, or the migrants, these kind of worldviews. So it's really important to have the structure of the flexible exhibition modules in order to grow and change with the acceptance or non-acceptance of the visitors. And here we learned hardly how limited we are with the tools of exhibition making. Still, we had some text labels, and a lot of people said, yeah, once they said they had read the text labels, they would go up again, go down the stairs again, and now feel what was going on as being a pequari, being a jaguar, being a human, and so on. So, on the other hand, we really work closely together with different groups of the Amazon. We have invited them to study our objects. We went to visit them, and at the end we worked together with very young people to do an internet platform where we put in all our information that we have of the object, and they add the information they have. And this is also an adaptation that for the first time, as far as I know, was made in Canada in the UBC Museum. I don't know if there are any others, but they really made the first invention of all these media concepts as well. Oh, that was too quick. Benin. Benin is another very difficult case, because on the one hand, these are really beautiful objects of art. They are perfect masterworks of how to work with metallurgy. And you do not want to disturb the aesthetic impression of the Benin bronzes, Benin plates. But there is a cool and hard story behind it. That has to do not only with the British being the colonizators of that part of Africa, of today Nigeria, but these things appeared on the London market, and Felix von Luschan was one of those who got to buy a big collection of these things. And It's a hard discussion. It's always hard to decide upon a person 100 years later, or more than 100 years later, because he was a child of his time, if he was a criminal or not a criminal. We cannot solve this. We have not lived in that time. But today we can explain to the visitor what's happened. So when you go, that's too bad. When you go on the back side of the Benin Bronxes, you see the young woman sitting there on the bench, on the chair. There you have a mixture of films, photographs, and introductory text and voices explaining the backside of the Benin Bronxes in any museum of the world. I cannot show you that backside. I have a picture because the people there mostly are not anymore working with the museum, and you know you have the right of your portraiture, so I don't want to show. Yeah, I don't want to show it, but I hope you can understand what I mean. Now I talked about the visible storages. Here is one example from Africa. The curators for the first version decided to tell the history of the collections from Africa, which of course has a lot to do with colonialism. As you know from the various parts in North America, in Europe it's not so much happening yet, that you decide as a visitor how deep you want to go into knowledge and information about the objects. Some people only want to see an object from outside, others want to have more information. But as in a visible storage, typically you have a dense presentation of objects. You can see with your eyes what is on the upper floors. My director general is a very tall person, and he wanted to have the last layout in the visible storage and up to 3.16 meters or so. So when you are a young person, you cannot see it, but with the media, you can see it. But we also have plans for the juniors that they can crawl into the lower part of it, and then you see a kid's face because there. So we also having fun with that. Now the famous part in Dahlem was the boats from the South Pacific. Everybody knows it, everybody likes it. It's a successful concept, so I decided to just take it to Humboldt Forum. Yeah, it's on 2 floors. When you go on the first floor in Dahlem, you can see from upside down and have an overview of the boats in the South Pacific. But we have learned from our young visitors. This is here a fake boat. They are allowed to use it. That young people really like to find out how to navigate, how to use the boats, how they work. And so we decided to have one of the junior spaces for the 9 to 12 years old right in the boats hall. This is the last day of the exhibition that we closed last year. We closed the exhibitions in Dahlem in 2 sections. One, the South Pacific, was already closed last year, or this January, sorry, and that was the last day. Now, I had a really hard challenge when Marco Stella presented his concept, his design, because what even he didn't find out, in order to save money, they shut his modern facade as a space site where from the beginning we had planned to have the boats and the houses from the Pacific. And when the poor designers presented the design, we said, this is not possible. There is no space, not for the boats, not for the houses. And only then the office of the architects confessed that they had cut the space at 2 sides, so the boats would not fit in anymore. So I had to find a new way, and what I did is we had 2 exhibition spaces in 2 cubes that the ex-general director had wanted, 2 extra special exhibitions, and I just took out the bottom. Is it the bottom? The ceiling, and then I got double height and also two spaces. Now it will be in two different cubes. It was not possible to unify them, but everybody liked it. So sometimes out of a problem, I don't know what happens here. Out of a problem, you get a better thing than you thought. So again, you will be able to come from the first floor and look downside, and then you can make it to a downside, and then go up again. And the same with the houses. Now, I don't know what happens with our. So we go back to Dahlem. The practical part of it. Do I still have some time?
Just a few minutes.
Okay. We closed the first part in January this year. Here you see the entrance. And what's going on? Yeah, we have to pack all the objects in order to get some empty space to move the oversized objects. Even though the smaller objects are not going to move before the end of 2018, but we have to start with the oversized objects. And it is really a challenge strategically, what to do first, where to leave objects, how to make the passageways. And I must say, we were all afraid of it. We have planned it for so many years, and now that we are in it, it just works. We are relaxed, it's fine. It's unbelievable how a good planning, it's worth it. And we are, I mean, if there were no changes in the concept, we really could open in 2019. It would be possible. Yeah. These are the masks from the South Pacific. Then they go to the waiting room, like in the doctors. Here they wait to get into the contamination cell. Then they get out cleaned at the other side, and then they can get packed for the transfer to the center. And as you can see, we do it with the journalists, we do it with the public. Cannot stop it. We invited journalists, and we also did guided groups. This is a Zilienzo Zela 2. You can see in the Brooklyn Museum a very similar object, which is one of my personal study objects, very important, very valuable. And it had been 49 years under glass. I started to study it as a young student, and I was not able to look at the upper sides because there was a reflection of the glass frame. So finally, we put it down. In the meantime, I asked a doctorate student to go on with the research because at some point you have to allow other people. So my young doctorate student, she can finally study it on the ground. It already has been on the ground, we hang it back. And here we give the explanation to the audience, to the public, and the public is really interested to learn about it. In Humboldt form, it will be in a sort of very heavy showcase. I asked Neil McGregor to change the showcase. I cannot do it anymore because of time and money, we had to stop it. And I tried to instrumentalize McGregor saying, hey, this is an ugly showcase, can we do a more transparent thing? But we want to show the visitors the details of the object. There are so many details in it. And by modern media, we want to enlarge it and explain it. And also, we want to show how we cooperate with the Coslawaka Valley, how we talk to the elders, how we ask the elders to explain us the geographical names that you find on that map. It's made from the early colonial time, when the Spaniards that just had arrived. The pre-Columbian codices had been burned, but there's a lot of information, and it shows how the native nobility tries to use the new European format in order to explain old context. context, and there's still people living in the Costa Valley who have this geographical knowledge and that you can ask. So here's my doctoral student talking to one of the elders. The whole exhibition module around it is talking about graphic communication systems. It's about script. We have a beautiful collection of Maya ceramics, so we will explain what's called the whole writing system, but we will also explain other forms of graphic communication. The lienzo is one piece of it. I also tried to explain how near we have come using more than only the alphabetic writing system, other kind of signs and symbolism in order to explain on a small space a lot of information. So if you look to your smartphone, you have these little apps, and you open them, you get a lot of information, like in the pre-Columbian codices. But our great-grandfathers would not have understood it, and our great-grandkids also were not able to understand it. I also want to explain that all these systems are culturally based, and you need to be a member of that society in order to understand what's going on. That makes it so very difficult for us to explain these documents. On the other hand side, you see Humboldt Fragment. Humboldt, who is one of the name-giving founders, had left 16 fragments in the State Library that are too fragile, that I cannot show them in my exhibition module. But this one is a very important tribute list. One part was found in Mexico only in 1949. It's from Guerrero. It has a bloody history about it, a lot of things to tell about Humboldt fragment. And as we have here nearby the so-called Swiss Hall with 11 meters high ceilings, there we will present our Kosowapa stela. Here. These stela is another story. I want to present them like that, but maybe we can discuss it later in time. So these stela are enormous in Dahlem. But once you put them where they're supposed in Humboldt form, they will be small. So I asked Mariana Castillo de Bal, who is a Mexican artist living part-time in Mexico City, part-time in the US, part-time in Berlin, to think about how to transfer the Humboldt fragments, the tribute list, where still some parts are missing, on the 11 meters wall. It was her idea, of course. I only said here are the Humboldt fragments. And she invented this, making the fields of the tribute list, it's about gold. They delivered gold to the Aztec Empire. To do it in I don't know what time, to the PowerPoint? Yeah. To do ceramic plates, and the wall will be covered by ceramic plates, where she does reproduction of the tribute list, but just producing these ceramic clay plates. And that over 11 meters. And I think this is a good way to honor Alexander von Humboldt, the founder of this building. And also you can tell this way, this interesting story that some parts are still missing, that one part is by Alexander von Humboldt, brought to Berlin in 1799, and the other part in Mexico. So we have a different way to explain the whole story. Okay, now we also have to pack objects that are not be moved to Humboldt form. They just have to go back to the storage. But maybe in the future we want to exhibit them again. So here you see the way how we do it. Of course they get a code, a barcode. Of course we all use all the modern media to pack the objects, but we also think, and you know, we have 2 wars behind us, that everything gets destroyed and so we do everything in a double way, and you have here the little pictures showing to you what kind of objects are in the boxes. Here are objects that are going to go away into storage. In the first part, we decided for the Northwest Coast, but when we remove this exhibition module, maybe we start to show the Hopi, the Kachina. So again, it's very important that we stay flexible and change our exhibition modules. Yeah, we already have the empty galleries in Darlin, looking like that. That was the North West Coast exhibition. You can see it's the same thing. And here it's in the Humboldt Forum. That was the inauguration of the brownstone, the ceremony. We had a concert and it was a hard rainfall. So when we open the roof will be fixed, of course. Yeah, I could not show you all the exhibition modules. Usually in other talks I have tried to make the whole tour on 2 floors, but we also wanted to talk about other things, so you can ask me about the other exhibition modules if you want to. And I thank you very much for your patience and for the somehow broken English, but I prefer this way and not read a written paper. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Viola, for a very rich and thoughtful reflections on this incredibly complex and fraught, SWOT-worthy process. It's mind-boggling. I'm very glad I have nothing to do with it. I was really struck by the junior spaces. I just thought the questions you're asking in the junior spaces are huge questions, which is wonderful, but they're questions that I could imagine informing the senior spaces as well. How do I comprehend the world? How do I navigate the world? Or in what do I believe? What's colonialism to me? These are huge things. So I'd like to ask the first question. I know lots of people have questions, but I'm going to use the chair's privilege. Are these also questions that you considered in relation to the modules, some of the modules, future modules for the non-junior spaces, if you want?
Yes, of course we did. We have even a list, a very long and complex list with questions like that. For example, the body concept. We have a flexible exhibition module on Chinese traditional medicine, because we have a very large, very old collection. We heard about that McGregor might put out the old stuff and do brand new stuff, because Chinese traditional medicine is just such a big thing. I wanted to use it for what does the body mean for me? Just the overall question, what is my body? What is if my body does not work? What is if I see my parents get weak and I have to care for them and they roll back to where my young children are? So we're starting with the Chinese traditional medicine, the TCM. You can explain a whole lot of healing system, using of medical plants. So we have a long list of these kinds of questions. Not all are as big. There are also, of course, minor things that not everybody. For example, we have one exhibition module, and I'm also afraid it might be cancelled, which is about beauty. My colleague, Paula Ivanov, who does East Africa, had in the Humboldt laboratory a beauty salon. And you had to stand in line and wait until the bottom would be green, and then you were allowed to enter, one person only. And then you would get into a condition like being a bride that is being prepared for her wedding ceremony. And I remember that little girls, like pink, stayed for there forever, pulling all the drawers, finding all the pink stuff, all the shawls, all the silver and gold. I said, hey, this is also the thing for a junior. It's not only something for. So I mean, making this project, even if not everything gets realized, also was fun. I must say so. It's not only punishment. No.
Good luck. I'm going to throw the floor open, and I'll choose to save Viola the embarrassment of favoritism. So,
can I ask another sort of basic question? You very convincingly say you don't want an overarching narrative because that would be far too reductive and presumably. But is there somewhere where when you come in to the museum, the visitor can get some sense of why these things, why all this stuff is here, and how it differs from, say, the stuff in the Bode Museum or the other components of the museum since.
When you come in, first of all, you not enter into the museum.
Right. So
you have to find your way.
Yes.
Then because it's this complicated structure of the expression palace. When you come in there, you cannot have the impression of an overall or view.
Right.
This is one of the most hardest challenges we have.
Right.
And I know that it's one of the most hardest challenges Neil McGregor has. Everybody has. Because this is not a great museum exhibition, museum. So I think somehow we have to start discussing before. I would say on the first floor, I heard that even our own library, and I like this idea, will not be there anymore. Because it's a very special library. I believe it should be there where the collections are. Because it's really bought, the books are bought with the background of studying the collections. So I heard they want to use this part as a sort of an education center. I think this is the very spot where you have to explain it. Now, the politicians want, and the president wants, my president wants that you even do not distinguish between why there are exhibitions in Humboldt form and why there are other collections in the museum's islands. You should comprehend it as one unity. Yeah. Oh. And so I say, Neil McGregor, have fun. Yeah.
Well, Neil has so much experience in the UK, when it's the National Gallery and the British Museum, of dealing with the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and so he's very adept. But whether he can deal with German politics as effectively as
yeah, but
I don't know.
it is really, you are right, you should have it. The question is where?
Yes.
The question is, and so I didn't want to tell it because I didn't want to be attacked by it. My speciality is space and concepts of space, and let's say sort of cartography, mapping, that's my thing.
Yeah.
So I have the overall geographical concept for Dahlem brought to it. You have seen, I didn't discuss Africa, America, Asia. You could have started with a different approach. But, for example, people from the Northwest Coast, people from the Amazon, people from Mexico, the first thing they ask, do you tell people where we are, where we live, where we are from? The where is another big question. And our visitors in Dahlem ask, where is Africa? Where are North American Indians? Where is Southeast India? So, the geographical context is one of the big questions of, you cannot just leave it out. So at least this is a little help that when you come into our floors, you will learn, Asia has its extra floor. I hope people are, why is Asia so important? Why does it have a whole floor by itself? World history, European history. Don't know how it's in the US. We have African history. Anyway, and then on go on the right hand to the northwest coast, or you go on the left hand to the South Pacific. You go on the other side, you go first to one part of Africa or to the other part of Africa. You will be told that you are entering into some overall geographical structure. But more is not possible in this time of the year.
First of all, thank you for your frankness. We don't usually hear that from people who are directors of museums, and that's very, very much appreciated. And for sharing these wonderful ideas. My question is, you explained, okay, Asia is on the elevated floor and ethnology is a little bit below it. Other projects in Europe that have taken old ethnology collections and melded them with other museums, the aesthetics have driven the choice of what gets put on display, and the ethnology sometimes suffers. I mean, you see this in the British Museum, you see this in Quebrami. Maybe you're saved because you did have these two adjoining museums in Dahlem, but I wondered if you seem to have come up with something that's wonderfully aesthetic, that doesn't compromise content at all, and I wonder how you navigated that.
I did not navigate it yet. Or I will not be the person who has to navigate it. But I think something like this will happen. As I said, it's the last time I can present this meeting why I'm so open, so frank, because it's the last time it's not yet touched on. But November 2nd, I will know. What will happen is Asiatic arts on the third floor is only one part. The other part is cultural anthropology and American. So arts is also in the Americas, in the Africas. So we don't say we do not have arts. There will be special exhibition modules where art is very strong. But there are others talking about Islam or text religions. Now, Neil, as everybody is expecting him to find something brand new, and as it should not be too actuality driven. So if he talks too much about migrants and too much about German colonies, in a few years it will be. So he has to find something that holds for quite a while. And I think it's a clever idea to go back to the Humboldt, the brothers Humboldt who gave the idea. When I came from the Übersee Museum in Bremen in 2001, I had the same ideas, because in the Übersee Museum we had natural history and history of trade and ethnology collections. In Berlin, when I started there, that was not wanted. That was not wanted. Peter Klaus Schuster wanted a sort of art exhibitions using the ethnographic collection, something like that. So, it's my personal bad luck that these ideas come now, but I can follow the idea of not differentiating between natural science and ethnography. That's so important that a person like Scheffler, who was doing the talk yesterday, that he is coming from exactly that side, that we say it's a Western artificial differentiation between humanities and natural science and cultural science, art history and so on. I hope Neil understands what kind of challenges he has. I'm not so sure. He wants to have Alexander von Humboldt's overall comprehension of the world, putting all the disciplines in. That he will do. But how he will include the future concepts, and that's also my interest. But it would have been great if had been allowed to do that a couple of years earlier. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think these are questions we're all struggling with, and I think
royal collections before that. Will the history of the institution be on display too, along with the kind of history of the nation and the history of maybe individual peoples and their engagements with colonialism? I mean, is that part of the kind of structure of knowledge that will be presented to people as part of the context for encountering the collections now in this sort of multidisciplinary museum, non-museum kind of space?
I just published an article touching this question a bit. I know that my predecessor, if he had stayed in Dahlem, would have done it. But in Dahlem, it's a different thing than doing it as a unity with the Museums Island. That would be very complicated. In my point of view, it only worked if all the museums director of the Museums Island plus Humboldt Forum would start to think it together. You cannot separate it at that site. In Dahlem you can, but not there. So what we did, especially with exhibition modules like the Northwest Coast, where what you might have known, we want to retell the story of one collector, different perspectives. So we wanted to show Captain Jacobson, to be sent by a person like Adolf Bastian with the idea of his time, going out in competition with all the other nations, building up museums, and we wanted to tell the visitor how it was at that time. Of course, with a sort of criticism on Jacobson, but on the same time also saying we were not living then. We don't know how we would have behaved at that time. But then, that would be the first part of his journey at the Northwest Coast. But then the other part, the other half, which is from the Arctic, then change it and more do the approach from the Anchorage Museum and say, how do people living today look to these objects? So, to answer your question, there are some exhibition modules and some parts in the visible storages that pick up this past pro toto, but we cannot do it as you indicated. It's a wonderful idea. It would be another fun project. And I personally also have the opinion that to reconstruct the history of the European museums is easy, because the documentation is in our language, is in our media, it's there in the storages. But to interpret what the objects mean by itself is a very difficult procedure. To interpret a jaguar share, to interpret a mask from Alec Bay, to interpret a pre-Columbian codex. We started that after World War II with international research groups. And it's a very sensible, very difficult to have result of interpreting objects. So I'm not a historian. I open my doors for all the historians to do that kind of job that you were indicated. But I want to use my knowledge, what I learned. And I feel responsibility also to allow that at the same time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You really painted a vivid picture of what the challenges are of this exhibition space and what it may look like in the future. What I'm interested in hearing more about is something you hinted at a little bit in your last slide in your answer to Malcolm. What about the logistical spaces of the Humboldt Forum and of your museum? The spaces that you may share with the other museums in the building, or that may be elsewhere, maybe the collections or the libraries you mentioned, the conservation laboratories. How will all these very, very necessary spaces be working in relation to the forum?
The Dahlem storage, with all we have restoration laboratories in Humboldt Forum. We have all this in Humboldt Forum, but the big part of the collections, I think you talk about this, the 400 something. They were there was a plan by the ex-president to move them all from the southwestern part of Berlin to the other part of the city, to Friedrichshain. And I said, hopefully not in my time, hopefully not in my time. Why do it? It's not necessary. I think Berlin is big enough. I'm talking about my personal visions. I'm not the one who can decide it. I would move the collection from the art building that they are now, that has to be destroyed anywhere, to the then empty ex-galleries in Dahlem, for example, the Museum of Asiatic Arts has a brand new building. And I would, because next door is Freie University, and the faculties that we most deal are Freie University and not Humboldt University. So Berlin for me is big enough to have a big research center, and Dahlem was planned as a research center after World War I. Just go back to the roots, have it there. We have a metro station there, and as we have this wonderful garden outside spaces, why not allow contemporary artists to do experiments outside? So I would leave it as a cultural center, but this is highly political. And I only hope that at least, because there is no money and there's total stagnation to move the collections to Friedrichshagen, that you just stay in down. In the Humboldt Forum, we have only public use, like restaurants, stores, convention center, cinema, the education center, the Humboldt University's flexible convention center, but not what is typically behind the exhibitions.
And we have time for one more question, please.
Thank you also very much for this fascinating talk and describing this colossal project that you are about to undertake. I'm wondering if you want to pay tribute to this kaleidoscopic worldview of the Humboldt brothers. How are you dealing with the more controversial categories of objects such as human remains, and also exhibiting objects that would touch upon cultural sensibilities either of its creators or of the receiving audiences?
If I had time, I would have explained you another laboratory concept that was called Open Secrets, that was dealing exactly with this kind of question. And the young curator in this case showed it with the example of collections from Australia and New Guinea of, for example, human remains are not human remains. There are categories of human remains that you can show to the public because they are part of necklaces, of bracelets, of any kinds of work human remains that in the society of origin are allowed to show. A lot of German visitors believe that any kind of human remains are not allowed to be shown. This is wrong. So this laboratory project would show the visitors these kinds of human remains. On the other hand, other objects are so tabooed for the Australian Churungas. What in English? Churungas. You are not allowed to show the objects, but you are not even allowed to showing the drawings of the ethnographers who drew them. So we showed the visitors, we are not allowed to show you the content of the book. We are not allowed to show the objects. We hang curtains in front of it. We found all kinds of way of exhibition to tell the visitors there are tabooed objects, or there are objects that are any male visitors older than 12 years can see, but all the others not. So we cannot show it, because we cannot say to the visitors, hey, only males or more than 12 years old can see the object. So we would show all kinds of categories coming with this very sensitive collections that we have. And also here comes the sharing of Deutungshoheit with other curators. We have made the experience, especially with people from the Northwest Coast, that some groups would say, no problem, the stuff is so old, all the power is gone, you can do whatever you want, so do this. And next was, oh God, put it away as far as possible. This is shaman requisites, let's say in apartment 12. So we have also different voices from all parts of the world. And I think this is part of Humboldt. Humboldt was a describer. He was not an interpreter. Sometimes he interprets when he is very sad. But he puts a lot of questions. He's not only interconnecting, he is the question, the interviewer. He puts all the questions. And I think one of the challenges is to react quickly, because the ways you deal with these collections is undergoing a lot of changes over time. And we feel hard to follow this.
Well, this is a wonderful spot in which to draw at least the formal part of this to a close. We've heard about some of the threats that come up with this project, some of the wonderful opportunities, there are weaknesses which your frankness has allowed us to get a glimpse of, but I think we can agree that the strength of this whole project really does emanate from the director herself. So very many thanks. And please join us outside. The refreshments are still there. There should be a glass of wine.